Okay, folks, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call the meeting of the Board of Adjustment to order. Madam Secretary, if we could call the roll for determination of the quorum, please.
Yes, sorry. Kim Toulouse,
Here.
Clay Thomas,
Here.
Christina Hill, Lee Lawrence,
Here.
Brad Stanley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. If we would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Webb, if you could do the ethics law announcement, please.
With pleasure. Board members are reminded that if, with respect to any matter or any person coming before the board today, you have received a gift or loan, you have a pecuniary interest or a commitment in a private capacity such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship, you must disclose that gift, loan, interest, or commitment at the time the matter is being considered. And you must abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it is clear that the gift, loan, interest, or commitment would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Boards of Adjustments rules, if you have had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the board today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Webb, and right back to you for the appeal procedure, please.
Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and you want to appeal its action, you may do so in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceedings being appealed, in accordance with the Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-3600 for information on the appeal process and the application fee. And for the board and the audience, I would note that all public hearing items today are appealable.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. We're now at public comment. Anyone wanting to speak and provide public comment on items either on or off the agenda, this is your opportunity. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone for public comment at this time?
We have no requests.
Okay, we have no requests for public comment at this time. Again, this is for items on or off the agenda. If you wish to speak at this time, I'll give you an opportunity, and you have to fill out a speaker's card with the secretary. And I see there's at least one, so we'll give you the opportunity, ma'am. You can fill out the card after you speak, but come on up and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Tamara Barron. I'm at 735 South Verdi Road in Verdi, and I came today because I received an official notice of a public hearing that Mr. Perchak was interested in changing his designation from general commercial to custom manufacturing. And I came because I was interested in what that manufacturing would be like, what the hours of the operation would be, what the noise would be, since in the past Mr. Perchak has had people in that space that maybe were in commercial compliance, but were operated outside of regular business hours and had an impact on my property. So I'm very curious about what this is about, and if you'd like more information than that, I'm happy to provide it.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close the public comment period at this time. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. However, we do have one change before we move to approve. Item 8E, which is the Lake Tahoe School, is actually going to be pulled from the agenda and sent to the Planning Commission. However, I'm going to move it to item number 1 rather than leaving it as item 8E. And at that point, if there's anyone here who wishes to make public comment on that, you can do that at that time. Okay, I'm getting used to these new glasses. So it's item 9E. You know, they're those lineless bifocals, and I'm trying to figure out where the line is. So it's item 9E. I apologize for that. So that will actually move to first position on the agenda. Chair will now entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So move.
Seconded.
Seconded, all in favor? Aye. None opposed, motion carries unanimously. Motion to approve the draft minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Moved, so moved. Second?
Second?
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries unanimously. And we're down to item 8A. We have, should be 8A. I am reading that right. 8A, which is a possible action to approve a resolution for appreciation of service for Bill Whitney. And if no one has any objections, I'm going to read the resolution into the record. Mr. Whitney is not here today, but after 28 years of great service to Washoe County and to this board, he finally retired and was unable to join us today for the resolution, but I am going to read it in the record, into the record. Resolution in appreciation of service, Bill Whitney, 1988 to 2016. Whereas Bill Whitney joined the Department of Comprehensive Planning on November 14th, 1988 as an assistant planner. Whereas Bill was promoted to planner with the Department of Comprehensive Planning, senior planner with the Department of Community Development, and finally in 2012 to director of the Planning and Development Division within the Community Services Department. Whereas Bill served as a secretary to the Board of Adjustment since his appointment as the division director. Whereas Bill consistently ensured that the Board of Adjustment staff reports and supporting material were of the highest quality and provided board members with all of the information required to make informed decisions on development applications. Whereas Bill effectively and efficiently oversaw and managed all Board of Adjustment meetings as the secretary, ensuring that the staff were prepared to provide succinct and fact-based presentations, that staff coordinated with other agencies for attendance at board meetings, and that staff accurately recorded all aspects of every board meeting. Whereas Bill provided invaluable advice and guidance to board members during their discussions and deliberations on development applications. Now therefore be it resolved that the Washoe County Board of Adjustment does hereby commend Bill Whitney for his extraordinary concern and devotion to the citizens of Washoe County through his service as a secretary to the Washoe County Board of Adjustment, and be it further resolved that the Washoe County Board of Adjustment will sorely miss the unique contributions of Bill Whitney to the board, and further extends to Bill its best wishes for a happy and prosperous future. Adopted this day, the 6th day of April, 2016. All in favor of accepting the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And if you would pass that on to Mr. Webb.
Mr. Chair, you do technically need to open it for public comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. If anyone would care to make public comment at this time, we'll accept it. Come on up. Come on up and state your name and address for the record, please, and then I'll ask you to fill out a comment card.
You just said 2016, it's 2017.
Oh, did I? Does that say 2016 on there?
It was not your wife, we'll correct it.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out.
Catch.
It should read 2017, we'll correct that. We're starting out really well today. All right, moving on to public hearings. The first case that we'll hear today is special use permit case number WSUP 17 is going to be the item that I moved from 9E, and it is special use permit case number WSUP 17-0004. Again, this item will be sent to the Planning Commission. However, if you took the trouble to come and make public comment on this item and still wish to make public comment at this time, we'll take it at this time and make sure that it's passed on to the board, to the Planning Commission. Anyone for public comment on that item? Madam Secretary, anybody?
There's no request for comment on that item.
Okay, I'm going to close the public comment on that, and we're done with that one. It'll move to the Planning Commission. Now we'll move on to the next item, which is special use permit case number WSUP 17-0002, the Seahawks Second Home. And who do we have up with this? Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Lloyd with Planning and Development. This item before you this afternoon is a request for possible action, hearing, and discussion to approve a special use permit to allow an existing 800-square-foot dwelling unit to become a detached dwelling unit, detached accessory dwelling unit, and to allow a new 180 square foot manufactured home, which will be placed on the same lot. The property, if I could, is this working? Okay, the subject property is located in Sun Valley. The address is off of Woods Drive, and I apologize, I'm looking for that. I'm sorry, 5439 Woods Drive. It's located north of 4th Avenue and east of Woods Drive and west of Leon Drive in the Sun Valley area plan. The property sits on a parcel that is .347 acres in size. That's just over 15,000 square feet. It has a regulatory zone of medium-density suburban. As I mentioned in the description, there's currently an 800 square foot home that currently is the primary residence, and the applicants are asking to place a manufactured home that is double that size, or roughly double that size, to be the primary use. And they want to keep the existing smaller 800 square foot property as their accessory dwelling for family members. As you can see from the overhead, the proposed 1,600 square foot manufactured home will sit on the southern portion of the property. We do not anticipate any significant impacts associated with this request. With the addition of this new home, it will in fact improve the appearance of the property. The new home will have 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. This item was heard by the Sun Valley Citizen Advisory Board this past Monday, and the board recommended approval by a vote of 4 to 1. The one comment was that it was on a dirt road, which is an allowed use on this property. The item was sent out to 58 different property owners. We noticed out a distance of 500 feet. To date, we haven't received any comments in opposition to the proposed request. This request meets all of the necessary 5 findings required for the approval of a special use permit, and staff is recommending approval of the proposed request. If you so desire, staff has a motion for your consideration. The applicant, Mr. Carmelo Ceja, is also in the audience, and he is available to answer any of your questions. And that completes my presentation, and I can answer any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Anyone have any questions for Trevor?
I have one real quick. Is this well, septic, sewer? How's that work?
This is on sewer. It's
On
served by the Sun Valley GID.
And it's not on a well?
Water and sewer, both served by the Sun Valley
That's all
GID.
I wanted to know. Thank you.
Or tell
Anyone
me
else?
serve the water.
Mr. Lloyd, I have a question. Under conditions, it says a minimum of 1 off-street parking space will be added. There's no issue with that? They've got plenty of space to do that?
They have plenty of space for off-street parking.
Great, thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak at this time? Come on up. If you're going to say anything, you got to say it into the mic. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll open this up to public comment. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment on this one?
No, we have no requests for this item.
Okay, seeing no request for public comment on this one, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Anyone? Seeing no discussion on the chair, will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
To approve.
Go ahead.
Yes. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approves special use permit case number WSUP 17-0002 for Camille Baraja Ceja. Close enough? Okay, thank you. With the conditions of approval including as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, that being consistency, 2 is improvements, 3 site suitability, 4 issuance not detrimental, and 5 effects on the military installation.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Second?
Second.
Motion seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None in opposition. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on, next case is variance case number WPVAR 17-0001. And again, we have, who is this one? Mr. Giesinger, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Toulouse, members of the board. Chad Giesinger, Senior Planner with Planning and Development, for the record. This is variance case WPVAR 17-0001 for Myra McSherry. It is a request to reduce the front yard setback from 20 feet to 10 feet 8 inches to allow for the construction of a two-car garage and associated hallway. Pictured there, you see the property, and you may recall this item came before the board at its last meeting and was ultimately continued, and this is the resubmittal of that application with a redesign. Subject property is located at 380 Tuscarora Road in Crystal Bay. This is the map that's provided here. It's in the steeply sloping area in between Washoe Road and Tuscarora. Subject property is zoned high-density suburban, which requires a 20-foot front yard and 5-foot side yard setback. The previous variance request involved both the front yard setback and the side yard setback. It was going to be a reduction to 7 feet and 3.5 feet respectively, but the project has been redesigned, and that's due to a decision to remove the tree. You may remember from the discussion last meeting of a very old tree on the premises, and there was an attempt to preserve it, but it was approved for removal by the TRPA, and so the property owners do plan to now remove it. Now that they're removing that tree, they have more space to work with, and to take full advantage of that space, they're changing from a one-car garage to a two-car garage, but it still has an associated hallway connection. So there's no longer a request for a side yard setback, and the request for the front yard setback has been modified to 10 feet 8 inches instead of the 7 feet. There's very limited parking currently on the site. The existing parking pad is partially in the right-of-way, as shown by these photos. You can also see in this photo the existing house built, I believe, in 1966. And also you can see how the property downslopes away from the road at a pretty severe angle there. Here's another aerial looking from the back of the property up from Washoe Road. You can see similar situated properties have all built up close to the road in this particular area with significant amount of retaining walls and so forth on the back end. Here's the existing site plan. You can see the pavers there encroaching out into Tuscarora Road a little bit. The garage will utilize some of that. And here's the proposed site plan. The red line is the actually required setbacks. The green line is the property line. And the outlined in yellow is the existing house footprint, and then in that orangish color is the proposed addition of the two-car garage. And then that brown line is the edge of pavement to Tuscarora Road. With the new configuration, there will be 15 feet of distance from the front of the garage to the edge of pavement. Elevations for the project. You have the street elevation here, as well as the back elevation. And the side elevation. Again, you can see the steepness of the grade there. The parcel is not exceptionally narrow. There are more narrow parcels on Tuscarora, but the property, as I've been alluding to, is extremely sloped, over a 40% grade. The existing 552 square foot residence is well within the setback already by approximately 18 feet. That was obviously constructed prior to the existence of the development code. There's currently no garage. As I said, parking is very limited. And as you saw in that aerial, most of the houses in this area are built up to close to the edge of pavement leaving the down sloping side open. In staff's opinion, special circumstances do exist due to the topography as well as the narrow right-of-way. Staff does not believe approval would be detriment to the public good. It would actually mitigate upslope property views. The parcel across the street is vacant, so there's no issues there. And it would also provide additional off-street parking, so public safety be improved. It's no grant of special privileges. Houses on either side have similar setback relief, and the existing house, as I mentioned, is already in the setback, and the proposed accessory garage use is authorized in this zone. Here are the reviewing agencies that received the application. Of these agencies, only two requested conditions of approval: planning and development, and engineering and capital projects, land development. And the conditions are pretty much the standard conditions you see on most of the variances. Those are attached as Exhibit A to the staff report. This time around, the Citizen Advisory Board did have a meeting, and they did review the project. According to the minutes of that meeting, the CAB had a few questions, one about verifying the percent slope, one asking if the existing house had a variance, and another question about the size of the garage, and if the side yard setback would be impacted. After discussion, the CAB recommended approval by unanimous vote, citing compatibility with adjacent properties, and staff has not received any other public comment, and I have not heard from the side yard neighbor on this resubmittal. You may call that individual provided testimony at the last meeting. Noticing, a total of 47 properties were noticed. There's a noticing map, the subject parcel in yellow. Required findings for a variance, I'm sure you're familiar with. Special circumstances, no detriment, no special privileges, youth authorized, and effect on a military installation. Staff has provided analysis of those findings starting on page 8 and believes all the required findings can be met, and is therefore recommending approval with conditions. Do you have a possible motion for your consideration? This is contained in your packet, so I'll skip over this and leave this up and open it up to questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Giesinger. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Giesinger? Seeing none, we'll open this one up for public comment. Madam Secretary, is anyone wishing to make public comment on this one?
We have one request, Dale Smith.
Chairman, members of the board, my name is Dale Smith. With me today are Chuck Meyer and Suzanne McSherry, the owners of the property. I have really nothing to add to staff's thorough description of the project. I would like to add that Chuck and Suzanne have reviewed the conditions of approval and are in accord with those, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. You are the applicant's representative, and I should have brought you up first. So anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, anyone else with public comment?
There's no further requests.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Does any of the board members have any disclosures? Okay, no disclosures, so discussion. Mr. Lawrence.
I just have one thing to say. I think the applicants have made a very wise decision in this matter. I expressed my opinion last time of the potential disappointments of trying to keep a 300-year-old tree and changing its environment so dramatically with roofs and walkways and things. And I think you're going to be much happier with this decision, absolutely. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Stanley. To Mr. Thomas, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I too just want to say thank you to the applicants. By what you've done by removing the tree basically has eliminated the side yard variance issue with your neighbor, which I'm sure they really appreciate. And by moving it back an additional 3.6 feet further back from the road and increasing the parking availability right there also will enhance that neighborhood. So I appreciate what was done.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Anyone else? Mr. Stanley.
Thank you. Kind of echoing what else has been said here earlier, it's very comforting and wonderful to see the process be executed in this way, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I really don't have anything to add other than thank you for your patience and willingness to continue this and bring it forth to this meeting. So the chair will entertain a motion. Mr. Stanley.
I would like to move that, after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve variance case number WPVAR 17-001 for Meyer-McSherry, with the conditions of approval included as Exhibit A for this matter, having made all 4 required findings in accordance with the Washoe County Development Code, Section 110.804.25. Special circumstances, 2, no detriment, 3, no special privileges, and 4, use authorized.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. All in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chair, just for the
Yes,
record.
sir.
The number was Whiskey Papao WPVAR 17-0001.
Correct.
Just 3 zeros instead of 2, just making sure.
Okay.
My new glasses.
Yeah, okay. We're all in the same boat here, so I apologize for that. So the motion will just amend that to reflect the proper variance number on there. So, Mr. Edwards, do we need to do anything other than notice that it's been amended as it was corrected?
No, you're fine.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, none opposed. Thank you very much. Moving on. Next case is special use permit, amendment of conditions case number WAC 17-0002, the Evans Greenhouses. And I believe Mr. Pelham is up for us today. Well, we moved that one to number 1.
You're supposed to be on item C, which is special use permit SUP 17-0006 for Verizon Rolling Thunder. You skipped C and D.
I see it on here, but I don't see that. Okay, so I am mistaken. We're on WSUP 17-0006, which is the Sacramento Valley Verizon Wireless Compacts. Mr. Giesinger, I'm sorry, I just skipped right over you again.
No problem. Once again, good afternoon, Chair Toulouse, members of the board, Chad Giesinger, Senior Planner with Planning and Development Division for the record. This is special use permit case WSUP 17-0006 for Verizon Wireless, known as Rolling Thunder case. This is a request to approve a new monopole cellular facility, 150 feet in height, a slimline pole. And pictured before you is the project site. It will be located to the north of that existing house, up where you see that minor grading disturbance up there and a partial road leading up to it. And I'll have more photos to follow. So Verizon is seeking to build this facility to improve coverage and data speeds in the Warm Springs Valley and Pyramid Highway vicinity. As some of you may be aware, if you've been out there, cellular coverage is spotty and there are drop calls. The facility would greatly improve both cellular coverage and data speeds, as well as the E911 service. The applicant is not claiming a significant gap on this project. It is being processed through the normal zoning regulations and height regulations. Verizon did explore 6 alternative locations throughout the northeastern portion of the Warm Springs Valley within their search ring, which is essentially an area along the foothills, which I'll have a picture of later in the presentation. Most of those sites did not satisfy service objectives or did not have willing leasers. So they are attempting the current location. Verizon's been trying to locate a facility in this area for well over a year, but their initial request was delayed by the need for a development code amendment. It so happened that GRA zoning had not been included in Article 324 when it was created. You may recall there used to be general rural residential zoning out in the Warm Springs area. It was kind of an administrative matter, but nevertheless, we still had to amend the code to correct it. So DCA 16-007 was approved in February to add GRA back in, which allowed this to move forward. The project is proposed on a 42-acre parcel in the general rural agricultural regulatory zone. The site is surrounded by other 40-acre parcels. The Warm Springs specific plan, however, is located to the southwest of the site, and that does have medium-density rural zoning, but it is over 2,000 feet away. Here's an overview of the subject vicinity. You can see the Pyramid Highway off to the left there. It's quite some distance from the highway, and it's north of Whiskey Springs Road. You can see the other large parcels around it there. Here's an aerial overview of the project site, give you a feeling for surrounded uses. It's right on the foothills of the Para Range. Here's the site plan provided with the application. On the left is the 50 by 50 foot lease area. Cabinets will be in the lower left-hand corner of the lease area, the tower dead set in the middle. On the right, you see the access plan to the lease site. This proposed road will roughly follow the existing partially developed Jeep track or whatever that is in the aerial. And there will be a emergency fire truck turnaround at the top as shown. And utilities will be brought up from Wayside. They will follow the majority of the road alignment, but not all of it. Here's an elevation of the slimline, of the proposed slimline pole, the array at the top. The pole is designed to allow co-location of future carriers. Will be enclosed by a 6-foot slatted fence. Surrounding zoning and uses. You can see the darker green. The darker green color in this image is the general rural agricultural zoning. The lighter green is general rural, and then to the southwest you can see where the Warm Springs specific plan begins. It's denoted with that medium density rural and high density rural zoning. The gray footprints there are existing structures, so you can see there's not a whole lot built out there at the moment. Photo simulations provided by the applicant. I know these are a little tough to see. This one is from Pyramid Highway, which is some distance from the site, so it's hardly visible. As you can see on the lower, the top here is existing, the bottom is the proposed. Here's one a little closer in from the intersection of Wayside and I believe Grass Valley Road. Here you can see it a little bit better. If the photo sim is accurate, you can see that it does not eclipse, it doesn't daylight, is how we describe it. You can't see it against the sky. Para's in the background there. And then here's one from the closest adjacent paved road, which is Whiskey Springs Road. And you can see that the Para Range in the background there. Height. The proposed height of the tower, 150 feet, is one of the taller ones I've seen recently, but it is technically allowed by code. In the GR, GRA, and open space regulatory zones, allowed height is governed by Washoe County Code Table 110.324.50.1, which is shown here on this slide. As you can see, it's a sliding scale of distance based on distance from either residentially zoned property or the nearest public paved right-of-way. In this instance, it would be the nearest residentially zoned property, because Whiskey Springs is farther away. So as shown by the table, the allowed height is plus 100 feet, basically, because the proposed location is almost exactly 2,000 feet from that nearest residentially zoned property. And staff used GIS, took the lat-long coordinates from the plans, so I have a pretty good confidence that we've located the tower and then measured that to the property line of the nearest residential zone, and I believe it's 2,006 feet, so it just barely squeaked in there. But staff will be, if this is approved, staff will require a condition of approval that Verizon survey that distance to ensure that it is 2,000 feet. Again, here's the table. As you can see, when you get out to the 2,000-foot column, it just says plus 100. Staff could find no evidence in code as to how far above 100 feet you can go when you're 2,000 feet away. The code is silent on that. I suppose you could build a 300-foot tower if you wanted to, provided it was approved. But again, the code is silent, so it's a topic of discussion. It should be noted, though, that a slimline pole is a stealth design, and therefore an additional 25% in height is allowed. So adding that to the base 100 feet gets you automatically to 125 feet. So really what's in question is that other 25 feet, but again, the code is silent on that. Verizon claims that the 150 foot is the minimum height that they need to achieve their service objectives. They get 146 feet was stated in the application is what they need to really meet their coverage targets. hence the 150-foot proposal. Here is a depiction of that distance, the pole location, and then the parcel there, the medium-density rural parcel. No significant ridge lines are impacted, as I was alluding to earlier. The paras are in the backdrop of the pole, despite the height. The pole is not within 1,000 feet of any public trail. The site is already partially disturbed. There are no other large poles or cellular facilities in the vicinity, and reflective materials will not be allowed to keep down glare. This is an allowed use in a general rural agricultural zone. The facility has been designed to accommodate co-location, as I mentioned, and the proposed structure does meet the required setbacks. It's probably more than 600 feet from the nearest property line, and the setbacks are 50 feet on the side and 30 on the front. Here's a closer-in view of the partially disturbed pad. The lease area will be to the north of that little vegetated, I think those are trees. It'll be just to the north of that, up the hill a little bit. Access to the pad will be off a wayside road up and through the parcel along that existing partially improved road you saw at the beginning of the presentation. The road alignment will be improved to a 20-foot gravel-based road that meets engineering standards and fire standards. Easements will be leased or dedicated, and the improvements will have that turnaround for the fire truck, and the facility will be unmanned, so parking is not proposed, but there is adequate space within the lease area. Grading details were not provided in the application for either the road or the lease pad, so staff was not able to review that. Staff did request the grading plans, but the applicant was not able to prepare them in time for this hearing, although I have been told that they are working on them. Staff can review grading as part of the building permit. Really, it's an administrative procedure. If it meets Article 438, then it's good to go. However, there is a chance that if the thresholds within Article 438 are exceeded, the applicant may have to come back to this board with a special use permit for grading. So they're taking their chance on that, but grading will be considered one way or another. Condition of approval is included to so state. Utility lines to the facility will be underground within the easements or the road. Lighting, as for most of these facilities, is minimal, with just one downshielded motion sensor light. And due to the remote nature of the property and lack of irrigation, Verizon is not proposing to landscape around the perimeter of the lease area. They did not submit a director's modification for parking, but the board does have the authority by code to vary standards as part of approval of a special use permit. So should the board agree with Verizon's argument about landscaping, which staff tends to agree with the applicant that landscaping probably isn't necessary in this location and wouldn't do much, the board should include in its motion, if there is a motion to approve, the waiving of that standard. Here's the map I alluded to of the alternative sites in the search ring. You can see the location of the sites considered. The Acre site was the site selected. Three of the reviewing agencies requested conditions of approval: Planning and Development and Engineering, and then the Palomino Valley General Improvement District owns and maintains the roads in the Warm Springs Valley, so they were consulted, and they just had a condition saying if any of the roads are damaged as part of installation, that Verizon needs to fix the damage. Those conditions are included as Exhibit A to the staff report. The Warm Springs Rural Citizen Advisory Board did not have a meeting during the review period, but the application was provided to the board. Staff did not receive any comments from the CAB nor the general public. Noticing was a little tricky on this one due to the large parcels out there. 500 feet only generated about 8 parcels, so staff hand-selected the rest of them. I tried to select properties that were near the site or had houses on them to reach the minimum required 30 parcels. As you can see, that's who got noticed right there. Required findings, you have 2 sets, actually 3. You have the special use permit findings, the findings for a communication facility, And then a finding also consistency with the Warm Springs area plan. Staff has provided analysis for all three of those finding areas, starting on page 21. Staff believes all the findings can be met. Staff is therefore recommending approval with conditions. Possible motion, this is included in your packet, so I'll move on. Here you have the motion findings you're required to make for special use permits, motion findings for communication facilities. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Giesinger. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Giesinger? Yes, sir.
Hi, Chad. First off, thank you very much for noticing out to the 30 parcels. That's above and beyond and much appreciated, I know, by the residents there, I'm sure. You know, in the photos, in the Photoshop work, the tower appeared to be white, and yet there was a comment about neutral. I know there's been, in the various areas, a lot of discussion about what colors things should be to best blend, you know, particularly with water tanks and that sort of thing. What sort of follow-up monitoring is there to be had around that color selection? Because, you know, white stands out like crazy. And I know that absolutely was not their intent in the photo work. Quite the opposite, but, so
Right.
what are your thoughts there?
So there will be a condition of approval requiring a neutral color. So there is a little bit of wiggle room on the color, but obviously we don't want bare steel, which will be reflective, or white.
Right.
And so the way that would be enforced is when they come in for building permit, I will enter a required inspection. And before they get a final on their building permit, staff will go to the site to ensure that the pole is painted and meets the condition. That's basically it.
One more. if I
Go
may.
ahead.
You mentioned that landscaping you didn't think would, you know, was particularly called for. With special use permits, and particularly with various kinds of utility towers and so forth, the conditions in the areas tend to change, and the requirements therefore tend to change. You know, there might be folks living closer and that sort of thing at some point. What capability or what process is there for revisiting that and saying, you know, 3 years ago, we didn't think landscaping was going to be too important, but now we kind of do. And so what's follow-up on that? Or do you need to make that provision now just to keep it open in some way?
Once it's approved, I don't believe we have a mechanism to then go back and require them to install landscaping after the fact, unless, like you say, we did approve it with a open-ended condition to that effect. I don't know, the legal counsel may want to weigh in on that, but I mean, I suppose you could go run an amendment of conditions, you know, 3 years from now or something like that, adding a condition back in there saying they would need landscaping, but I'm not sure if the applicant would need to agree to that or not once they've already had their final approval. So I guess I'm not giving you a definitive answer on that, but
I certainly didn't know, and apparently it's not a question that's
Yeah.
very often asked.
usually what comes up is landscaping dies or something like that, and then we've got to go back and revisit it, and we have mechanisms in place to deal with that. But if landscaping's been waived by an approval, I don't recall us going back after the fact and then requiring it.
Flipping back to it, if I may,
Yeah.
if it were not waived, what would landscaping be?
It would only require 20% of the lease area of the disturbed area to be landscaped. So you're talking about 20% of 2,500 square feet. So you're looking at maybe a couple bushes, realistically, around the outside of the fenced area. And I'd also point out that the project site is quite some distance from the nearest public traveled road. So it's probably not going to be very visible from that, and that road is not you can see that road pretty much dead ends into the Para range. Typically, we want to see landscaping in more highly visible areas, things of that nature, and for screening.
And if I might, what would also part of the condition, what the normal standards for landscaping is that they have to be maintained. So that means that, in this case, the project proponent would have to have some system that would then ensure that the landscaping is not going to be planted and died, but rather it's going to be there over the course of years. So that's the other thing to keep in consideration with any vegetation.
Yeah, staff is including a condition for revegetation of any disturbed area that's not going to be enclosed within the screened area. So there will be that component to the project.
And the last question I have is just a question of process. You mentioned a couple of times that code remains silent on anything over 100 feet, and so, 150. How's 900? In other words, is it something that you kind of have to check the box saying maybe we got to cycle back to that at some point for code, or?
It's definitely something we should probably have some discussion about. I don't know how often it's come up. It's the first time I've encountered it, so
Sure.
I couldn't find, I asked around, no other staff had processed one
Right.
that high recently and could not remember what our policy was on that. But again, it just says plus 100, so, I mean, I guess you could infer from that scale, you're getting 10 feet for each, but it's no rhyme or reason really to it, so,
All right.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just referring to a picture that on my documents is on page 6 of 26 here. It's the bottom photo. I don't know if you have that. I'm just curious as to what that item is that is south of the proposed site. Is that a residence sitting there, or?
Yes, that's the existing house on the site.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Seeing no further questions for Mr. Giesinger, does the applicant wish to address the board?
Hi, my name's Michelle Ellis. I'm here from Complete Wireless Consulting on behalf of Verizon Wireless. I can tell you a little bit about the site, answer any questions you may have. So this site was designed to address a coverage gap along Highway 445 going up to Pyramid Lake. We actually have a couple sites in development in this area, and we're trying to bring this whole corridor up to 4G LTE coverage, so someone can be driving and have uninterrupted data coverage, and for the residents in this area to have good data coverage. They want to work from home, they want to use it for internet, whatever they choose. So we designed this site to be close enough to that surrounding area that they would have good coverage, but further enough away that we would have the facility out of sight. Part of the reason for the height is to reach as far as possible and to cover as much area as we can. The lower we go, the more sites we need. To answer some of the questions that you brought up before regarding the height limit, it's actually interesting. Your code prohibits lattice towers and guide towers, and those are what you would need to go above 150 feet. With a monopole, 150 is about as tall as we can do them. So it is kind of a technical height limit. Maybe one day they'll have taller monopoles and you could do a 900-foot one, but not right now. So the color that we would propose would be like a dark matte tan. Generally, we send a sample of it to staff before putting it on the plans. Anything in Sherwin-Williams catalog we can do. Sometimes dark green looks good, but in this area, probably like a dark tan. Regarding the landscaping, we prefer not to do landscaping just because of the maintenance. This is an unmanned facility, and the technician goes out there once or twice a month just to make sure everything's in order. It's remotely monitored by computers, like 24/7, but there's not anybody on site. When you have living organisms outside of it, they need attention and care, and we try to avoid that responsibility, because if the plants then die, then our permit goes out of compliance. What we prefer to do, if you're concerned about the aesthetics at the ground, is maybe to do a fancier type of fencing. We can do Trex fencing, which tends to look really nice and lasts a long time. Right now it's proposed chain link with privacy slats, but we could do like a nice Trex. Also, a little bit south of our lease area, I know the landlord is trying to start a fruit orchard, so there will be more trees there in the future. I know they've done a lot of planting recently, but it'll give it some context. And there was just one modification that I would like to request to the conditions of approval. Condition 9B asks for proof of permanent easements. We actually don't have permanent easements here. We have a lease with the landlord, so they're just temporary easements. I spoke with Leo Vesely, the engineer who put this together, and he said that, he gave me clarification, we could change that word permanent to proof of. So the applicant shall provide proof of easements for the lease area rather than permanent. I just wondered if you could make that change, because we won't have permanent easements. But if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for the applicant? Yes, sir.
If, and this may be for Chad as well, if there's a change toward track fencing or even, in fact, a change toward, on the easement, how does that impact the motion? Do we just kind of rewrite it on the fly, or what are you thinking there?
I don't believe changes to the fencing would rise to the level of change in the motion, but maybe
Gotcha.
they would weigh in on that. Yeah, but on the condition, you'll definitely want to mention that you're changing that language, as attached,
And if I might, Mr. Giesinger, if the board is considering waiving the standard for landscaping, then they should include that in the motion also.
Correct, yeah, I requested that earlier, yeah, exactly.
And one other question, I think for the applicant or Chad, either one. Again, are we to understand that the easement that is had, rather than being permanent, does it run with the land if that parcel is sold?
Yes, but it's subject to a lease term, which Verizon has the option to renew. I believe the initial lease is 20 or 25 years, and then it goes up for renewal. And then there are provisions in the lease that if Verizon stops using the site, they have to remove all of their equipment within a certain period of time, things like that.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone for public comment on this one?
Yeah, we have Brian Aker.
Hello, my name is Brian Akery. I'm the landowner of the property, and I would just like to inform the board that cell phone coverage there has been spotty and inconsistent for the 20 years that we've lived there, and these towers will improve the quality of life for everybody that lives in the valley, and that'll make it a lot more safe and secure, especially for anybody that may have health problems out there. Are
Thank
there
you.
any questions?
I think we're good, thank you. Anyone else, Madam Secretary?
We have no other requests on this item.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Any disclosures on this one? Mr. Thomas?
I don't know if this needs to be disclosed, but my cell phone carrier is Verizon.
Mr. Stanley?
My carrier is Verizon. Also, I'm a retired Verizon employee.
Thank you. I am also a Verizon customer. No? Well, you got some work to do. Anyone else? No further disclosures? Okay, Mr. Edwards.
So, Mr. Stanley, do you have any ongoing commitments to Verizon based on the fact that you used to be an employee?
Other than hoping they take good care of my 401k, no.
Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Stanley as well, are these connections that either of you have anything that prevents you from being impartial here in the hearing today? No?
No, thank you.
Mr. Stanley, with regard to your retirement benefits with Verizon, does the outcome of this proceeding in any way affect those benefits, either positively or negatively?
I think the non-humorous answer is no.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Okay, no further disclosures. We're open for discussion. Anyone? I have to say that at this point, I am not willing to change the requirement for landscaping in the disturbed areas, especially since we do not have a grading plan. We don't know exactly what the footprint is going to be, and I'm just not willing to drop that requirement at this time as a condition of approval.
I have comments
Mr. Lawrence.
regarding that. So are you saying you would like to have grading there on the site? I mean, excuse me, landscaping?
Well, when I speak in terms of landscaping, I'm talking about restoration of disturbed areas with the proper seed mix. So, which is always a plan within the development code.
Okay, I understand that. So that, but there's a definite distinction between landscaping bushes around a chain
Correct.
link fence
Correct.
versus any reclamation for disturbed areas, erosion and whatnot concerns there. I would be very against putting a couple bushes around the structure. I think it would make it more visible to the public, and I would also be against putting anything but a chain link fence that you can see through, because they're hard to see from a distance, chain link fences, believe it or not.
I don't disagree with you. However, I still am of the opinion that the disturbed areas, there should be some effort made at reclamation with the appropriate native seed mix or native seed plants, or native seedlings. I'm not saying put juniper bushes around the property. I'm talking about the restoration of the disturbed areas, and I can't really make a good judgment on that without looking at a grading plan and knowing how much disturbance we're gonna have exactly.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
if I might,
kinda saying the
if I
same
might for the board, there's really the two separate issues.
Right.
And what the chair is speaking about is
Is
condition
just the landscaping issue?
1I,
Okay.
which is the restoration of disturbed areas. So there's no proposal by staff nor the applicant that I have heard to remove that condition.
Okay.
Discussion is the second point, which was brought up and talks about the required landscaping at the project site itself, which would be the landscaping around the fenced area and the immediate top. That was the request, I believe, by the applicant and by staff supporting that request to waive the landscaping landscaping requirements at the project site.
Okay, I'm good with it then. Thank you, Mr. Webb. Mr. Stanley?
Chairman, I know that in the past, you've always been adamant and have an expertise in ground disturbance and the appropriate kind of ground coverage being used. Is it explicit in the code that the indigenous species that are absolutely correct will be used?
Mr. Webb, can you address that for me? I know the answer, but I'd prefer to defer to Mr. Webb.
What the condition reads, if you read condition 1I again, with seed mixes that are native and/or adapted to the area.
Right. And that suits my purposes just fine. That, you know. Anyone else? Any other discussion?
I have a question, and I'll
Mr.
probably
Stanley.
defer to expertise here on the board. But one of my concerns is, that, and by the way, this presentation and the plan and the location, we've seen other other efforts towards cell phone towers, and this one is one of the cleanest, most thoughtful, and well presented, by the way. The Trek fence had an appeal, but simply if you were close. But what I hear you saying is nobody's close, and at 1,000 yards, if you've got your 1,000-yard stare, you're not going to see a chain link fence anyway. Is that the argument against a Trek fence?
That is my opinion, yes. I don't know if it's an argument, but constructing something with a vertical presence, it changes the light and things. To me, it just makes it more of an eyesore to put more stuff out there. Chain link fence, you see through it, you can see behind it, and you just don't observe it very well. It's not a sound issue here.
Okay.
It's just, it's practicality.
Typically, many of these projects require slats through the chain link and some sort of screening. And in this particular instance, I happen to agree that an open chain link fence is the best option. So, any other discussion? Okay, seeing no other discussion, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Lawrence.
I move that after considering the information contained within the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with the conditions included as Exhibit A in the staff report, special use permit case number WSUP 17-0006 for Verizon Wireless, being able to make the findings required by Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and Section 110.324.75 for approval of special use permit. Those being for consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, effects on a military institution, none being of which. Was there more as far as proof of easements or, okay, we discussed the
So,
landscape.
but I would offer that for the make of the motion, if you wish to concur with the applicant's request, you should specifically refer a modification of condition 2B to read, the applicant shall provide proof of easements for the lease area instead of permanent easements. Secondly, if you wish to modify what I heard were two requirements from the code, the first one being no landscaping required at the project site, and the second one is that no requirement of slats or screening in that chain link fence.
Okay, so proof of easements, proof of easement in the lease area. Okay, this has gotten really difficult.
So for what, if I might,
Sure,
and for the chair.
please do.
What the board would be considering is modifying condition 2B
Okay, modify condition 2B.
to read, the applicant shall provide proof of easements rather than permanent easements.
The applicant shall provide proof of easements rather than permanent easements.
Correct.
Okay?
And then the other two were no landscaping required at the project site,
No landscaping required at the project site.
no need for additional screenings,
No need for additional screenings,
specifically slats in the chain link fence at the project site.
specifically slats and the chain link fence at the project site. I feel like I'm marrying somebody here. Are you okay with that as the applicant? The applicant agrees to those conditions. Okay. Okay, and as further findings, WCC section 110.324.75 meet standards, public input and impacts, as well as part of the findings and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. We have a motion such as it is. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Stanley. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, no opposition. Moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Moving on to administrative permit case number WADMIN 17-0002, Curtis Beck, Ms. Kraus.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Eva Kraus, planner, Washoe County Community Services Department. This is a request for a temporary, well, it's actually called an outdoor events business license. And under the code, you do need to go through the administrative permit for this. So basically, what we have here is Incline's Fine Arts Festival being held in Incline Village at Preston Field on Friday, August 11th to Sunday, August 13th, 2017. This is an arts and craft, or an art sales festival. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is the fourth year they have requested. Well, they've held the event for 3 years, and this is will be the fourth year. They are proposing to have 40 vendors. They said 2 food trucks, 1 per day, and they are estimating that approximately 900 people per day will be attending. There'll be no amplified sounds and no lighting. Basically, it's a daytime event. The pictures here are from the 2014 Arts Festival. I did not review the permits last year, so I did not go to the festival and take pictures, so I'm using old pictures. Basically, I sent this out for review. There were very few comments. Most comments were positive. It was brought to my attention that there are concerns about the traffic and parking, mostly because Preston Field has 32 parking spaces, and for 900 people a day, that didn't sound adequate. The applicant said that there was no problems with parking in the past, but staff is concerned about it, and traffic engineering asked for a traffic plan as a condition of approval for this year before we'll issue a business license for it. Part of the traffic plan would require them to put signs on the NDOT right-of-way stating that there's no parking and, that there's a special events coming up. That requires NDOT permits, so that is also a condition of approval. The third thing that came to our attention is not just this festival, but Incline, Red, White, and Tahoe Blue, other festivals that we have where you don't sell tickets and where you don't have some way of counting attendance. All the numbers in the applications are based on the applicant's best guess. And unfortunately, the number that you put in your application helps the staff, fire, emergency services, sheriffs, determine what kind of needs will be required for each year. So we are asking this year, as a condition of approval, that they provide some sort of attendance counts. So next year when they apply, that we can't do that. Other than that, there are standard standard conditions for health purposes, business licensing, and other controlling things in the application. But those are the three main conditions that I wanted to point out in this request. The recommendation is to approve this permit, allow them to go ahead and have this festival this year if they meet all their conditions of approval, pre-event conditions. Like I said, all the feedback from the other agencies were that they can handle this, that they haven't had problems in the past, but we do want to make sure that there are no problems going forward in the future. So, as I said, staff is recommending approval with the conditions. Oops. Sorry, going through this. This is a motion that's included in your staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, by the way, I did send it to the CAB this year. It's not required to have CAB review, but the CAB also supported holding the festival here at Preston Field, with the suggestion that maybe the sheriff's office should be involved. And I'm sure the sheriff's office will be involved whether they suggested it or not. So anyhow, if you have any questions or comments of me, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Anyone have any questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. That was part of my question, whether NHP or the sheriff office was contacted about this event in
Oh, yes.
prior instances, and what concerns or what issues they've experienced in the past.
Actually, I did contact NHP and the sheriff's office, Incline Sheriff's Office. Michelle Below is the new sheriff, also the fire department, and emergency services. All of them basically said they had no comment at this time, but they are on top of it.
Continue.
Go ahead, Mr.
I
Thomas.
believe in the past, I believe it was 2 years ago, there was a concern about people parking on the road and crossing the street, and that was becoming an issue at that time, and that was 2 years ago.
Right.
When the estimated crowds were supposedly at 500. Now the estimated crowds will be as high as 800 to 900.
That is true, and actually that was told to me by other staffers, but I didn't have any of the agencies say that. That is why I contacted our traffic control people, and they put the conditions in approval that before the business license will be issued, they do have to submit a traffic plan to engineering showing how they're going to be controlling traffic, where they're going to where they're going to be posting signs for not parking on the highway, and where they're going to have off-site parking. So that is a condition of the permit, and it's something. It's kind of a work in progress. If they can't control it this year, it will have much more effect on whether we recommend approval of the permit next year. As I said, last year I didn't handle this permit. Unfortunately, the planner who did is no longer on staff, and so there's a gap in the history here.
Mr. Stanley.
Yeah, probably along the same lines on traffic. Did we hear properly that there are 33 parking spaces?
It's 30, it's between 30 and 33. I'm not exactly sure.
I think it was 33, but.
I think it's in my report someplace.
There seemed to be somewhere there, there seemed to be some kind of an algorithm that said that's a sufficient number if kind of everybody comes equally every hour. And I thought, you know, I was wondering if that was kind of rule of thumbish, or, because usually, you know, businesses have
Yeah.
peaks and valleys, lunch, blah, blah, blah.
And actually, no, that is actually, I believe that was the applicant's statement that,
Applicant,
that
yeah.
it comes pretty steadily. That is why we are requiring the traffic study, the traffic report, plan, and the parking plan.
And if I may, one more?
Yes, sir.
And wasn't there a letter from the cab or cab-related feedback saying, making the suggestion there should be, I want to say off-prem parking with some kind of a shuttle arrangement should be considered?
That
We
was
support-
engineering's and
Engineering,
staff's
okay.
recommendation. The
Just for
cab
Mr.
basically voted
Clay's
approval.
concern. And then the last question, if I may. What's kind of the process if this were to be approved now, traffic studies done, doesn't pencil, doesn't work well, isn't sufficient, has no teeth or whatever, however you want to frame that? How do you have a word with
The traffic report has to be approved by the traffic engineer at Washoe County. If they're not satisfied, they will not sign off on it. If they do not have an approved plan by the deadline that's put into the conditions of approval, we will not issue them a business license.
Thank you. And were they aware of the concerns, for an example, of the citizens from the cab, that opinion?
I did send it to the applicant. Actually, I talked to him on the phone last week and told him about that. And he said that he appreciated the concern.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Kraus. I appreciate your hard work on this. This is the fourth time that I've heard this one. And I really appreciate the efforts going into the accountability part of this. That's been a question in my mind as this event has obviously become more and more successful and is growing. I do have one question. What happens if they hit 900? Does the event come to a stop, or?
No, that basically, because they're saying 900, we're reviewing it as an administrative permit this year. If they exceed 900 this year, the next year they will have to apply for an outdoor festival permit. That would go to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
And if I might, for clarification, the number is actually 999. 1,000 is what triggers the requirement to go to the Board of County Commissioners.
You are correct. Thank you, Mr. Webb, for that correction. Anyone else? Okay, yes, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one other quick question. There's going to be a food truck there, or two of them, but they'll be there one at a time, as I understand it. But within the documentation here under H, it says no parking of the food trucks or the vendors shall be permitted basically on the field between the time of the event.
On the parking lot. I'm sorry, did I
Okay, on
put
the parking lot.
field?
So there'll be it says,
Right.
Yeah, it says parking lot.
it says
Okay,
parking lot.
okay.
Okay, so they're gonna park on the grass then and
They,
leave spots available?
yeah, the food truck, I'm assuming, will either putting on the grass or over in the playground area. Basically, what I'm saying is you gotta reserve the parking spaces for the customers. You can't use up all your parking spaces and then expect people to park on the highway and walk across the road, you know?
I just didn't see on the overview map of where all the vendors are,
Yeah,
where that truck would be, so that was just a clarification.
that's,
Thank you.
that's up to the applicant to figure out where he's gonna put that, but it's not gonna be on the parking lot. And I will go up and inspect this year.
Anyone else? Mr. Lawrence? Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Does the applicant wish to speak? Doesn't look like he's here. Okay. All right. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment on this one?
Yes, we have one. Kathy Brandhorst.
Yes, my name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I am the United States President. I have a little bit of concern about this because the event that you're talking about, it sounds like it's going to be somebody's home where they will be actually using the business for. The business sounds like it's going to be dismantlers. And it says begin at 7 a.m. on August 11th and will be completed by 9 p.m. on August 13th, 2017. Also, it just doesn't make any sense to have persons, at least 900, to watch this. It sounds like that you're going to be stealing people's money in order to pay lawsuits, maybe. Also, it says Development Division, Community Service Department to issue the license when all pre-event conditions have been completed. Well, we haven't really heard that it has been completed yet. We haven't even heard about the Community Services Department. So I'm not really sure, why they would put that in if there is a person who's in the welfare department, maybe you're talking about, that's going to be with you to support yourselves in the outdoor community event of dismantling. That's how I feel. That's how what I got out of this. I don't know about anybody else, but I just wanted to give you an opinion of my own. And this is how I felt when I read it. So I just wanted to let you know how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Anyone else?
We have no further requests for this item.
Thank you. We'll close the public comment period and bring it back to the board. Before we have discussion, any disclosures? Seeing none, discussion. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this is a popular event that has been growing over time, and I believe the community up there enjoys it. My concern is the traffic situation and the amount of pedestrians that will be on or near the road. I did some quick calculating, and using the applicant's outdoor event application, he lists approximate number of customers and spectators. On average would be 800, and at the peak it might be as high as 900. If you take 800 people in a day over a 7-hour period, that's 114 per hour that are coming through the event. There's only 30 parking spaces available for that, and 114 basically divided by 2, that's the number that the engineer department gave of people per car. That still comes out to, I believe, 57 cars that need to arrive, which far exceeds the number of available parking. And so they're gonna have to park somewhere, and if they don't park on the road, they're gonna have to park off-site, and they're still gonna have to probably walk in, or they're gonna have public transportation. And the vendors that they're estimating of about 40 can't park on-site, so they're going to be taking up parking spots off-site somewhere else. So the event is growing to a point where I don't know if the infrastructure can handle it if it continues to grow at this level and goes on. It's just a concern I have. I don't know if it's pressing enough right now to address a denial, but it's just a concern I have as to the numbers themselves as they play out.
If I might, the comments that you just made, it occurred to me that one aspect staff can certainly do is provide those comments to our traffic engineer, who will be reviewing the traffic plan to be submitted by the applicant as a part of the conditions if the board approves it. That way, our staff engineer can benefit from the math you just did, and will also understand your concerns as a traffic engineering is reviewing that traffic plan prior to its approval and then subsequent issuance of the license should this board approve the use permit. Just a thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I can tell you that the traffic and parking issue has been a concern of this board since the very first time we heard it 4 years ago, and it remains a very high concern that, as Mr. Webb said, that will be looked at in a very serious fashion, and if it becomes an issue, it will have to be addressed at a future meeting. So, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion. I move that after giving reasoned consideration for the information contained in the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustment approve, subject to the conditions contained as Exhibit A in the staff report, administrative permit case number WADMIN 17-0002 for Curtis Beck, an administrative permit under WCC section 110.310.20 and a temporary business license under WCC 25.272 for the Incline Village Fine Arts Festival, an outdoor community event. The event will be held on August 11th through August 13th, 2017, from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. at Preston Fields, 700 Tahoe Boulevard, Incline Village, Nevada. Event setup is proposed to begin at 7 a.m. on August 11th, 2017, and the event takedown and dismantle to be completed by 9 p.m. on August 13th, 2017. The event organizer estimates the maximum number of attendees in the event will not exceed 900 persons on any day, any one day of the event. If approved, authorize the Director of Planning and Development Division, Community Service Department to issue the license when all pre-event conditions have been completed, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code 1110.808-25. That being number 1, consistency, 2, improvement, 3, site suitability, 4, issuance not detrimental, and 5, effects on a military installation. With the caveat being that I would like the traffic engineer to work up the potential amount of cars that will be attending this event and comparing that against the number of spaces available.
Mr. Thomas, are you proposing to add that as an additional condition of approval?
Yes. And I believe that might fall under site suitability, number 3. Correct, and as I understand that too, the modification would probably best fit in condition 3BII, which requires the applicant to submit the parking and signage plan. My understanding would be those would be additional considerations by this board as a part of that condition. That is correct, yes, I'd include that.
I would second.
Okay, we have a motion as with the amendment of conditions. It is seconded. Any further discussion on that? I want to ruminate on that for just a minute. Can you read that motion for me again, please?
You want me to start at the beginning?
No,
of this
that's
whole
all right,
motion?
just the part that, just your amendment.
My amendment would be, I would like the traffic engineer or engineer department to conduct some further research based upon the number of available parking spaces compared against the number of anticipated vehicles that will attend this event, and whether those spaces will adequately hold the number of those vehicles.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, as an amended motion with the addition of condition of approval. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We are going to take a short 5-minute break at this point. Thank you. Okay, Board of Adjustment is back in session. We will see the next case is amendment of conditions, case number WAC 17-0002 for the Evans Greenhouses. Mr. Pelham, you're up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Roger Pelham with Washoe County Planning and Development. This amendment of conditions request is actually one of a series of approvals that has been granted for the subject site. Did I killed it. How did I do that? I apologize. Perhaps I'll stand here and tap dance. Can I, okay. Ah, there we go. So the current request, backing up, 2 large commercial greenhouses were approved to be constructed on the subject site off of Cantlin Lane out in the Wadsworth area between Cantlin and the river. One of the greenhouses, the smaller of the two, about 4,000 square feet, was constructed. However, it has never been finalized. So there has never been a final building inspection done on it. It has, however, been utilized for a number of years now. The second, much larger greenhouse was never constructed. However, site development work has been done. The entire plan for the subject site is changed, and a commercial use is no longer anticipated. So, the applicant, on behalf of the property owner, is now requesting that all of the previous conditions of approval, which primarily dealt with the commercial use, be removed, and that the one 4,000 square foot greenhouse that has been constructed can go ahead and remain there as a detached accessory structure, accessory to the existing dwelling unit. This vicinity map shows the subject site in relationship to the surrounding area. Again, you have Wadsworth just there to the northeast, and the little squiggly line across the bottom right corner there would be the Truckee River. This is the site plan that was previously approved. As you can see, there was a large driveway to accommodate things like semi-truck and trailers bringing supplies in and produce out, the existing greenhouse to the top there, and then the larger greenhouse which was not constructed. This is a photo of the subject site. You can see the existing greenhouse there on the right-hand side of the photo, and to the left you can see the existing dwelling unit. You can also see that there has been substantial disturbance in preparation for the second greenhouse. Building permits were never issued for that. You can see that there's various, piles of debris and things of that nature. This is a little better photo showing the greenhouse that was constructed, and this would be looking sort of southeast. The river would be about 300 feet behind this, more like 400 feet. So, in the past, in 2012, there was an approval for the two commercial greenhouses. In 2015, that was extended. And the current request is to maintain the one, eliminate the commercial use. Importantly, the applicant's representative is saying that their main goal at this point is just to sort of clean up, restore the site, get things back in neat and tidy, and then actually go ahead and sell the parcel. And getting the amendment to eliminate the commercial use and to designate the existing greenhouse as accessory to only as accessory to the residential dwelling unit is that is their priority. Now that change represents a substantial decrease in the intensity of the use, and again, the applicant has committed to restore and stabilize the site. You saw a lot of sort of disturbed and unstabilized dirt there. That will all be taken care of. Additionally, one of the impacts that was identified with the commercial use and would still be in effect here is if there are grow lights turned on at night, this thing would sort of light up like a beacon, and they've agreed to a condition of approval that, yeah, we're not going to have grow lights on at night. It's a greenhouse, it'll use the sun. I had planned on attending the East Truckee Canyon Citizen Advisory Board last night and bringing you their comments. However, the meeting was canceled, so I had a free night. Public notice was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Development Code. Those folks that are shown in yellow here did in fact receive notice, and that included 44 parcels out to, what I say, about 4,100 feet to get the 30 individual property owners. The modified conditions of approval have been included at Attachment A to the staff report provided to you. I believe that all of the findings required can be made, and I think that's a pretty easy one to make because it was substantially more intense, and now we're looking for substantially less. And that is my recommendation, and the possible motion is provided for you here and in your staff report. With that, I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Any questions for Roger? Yes, sir, Mr. Stanley.
Roger, hello, thank you very much. Did you receive, obviously, nothing verbally from the canceled CAB meeting? Any letters, notes?
I did not.
Any letters, notes from your noticing?
None.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Pelham.
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon, Chairman and Board. My name is Brian Bishop Paris. I represent the applicant. I'm about a 30-year friend of Mr. Evans. Did a lot of business with him through the years. In 2011, I'm just giving you a little bit of the rest of the story real quick. In August of 2011, he asked me to look for a piece of property where his idea was to grow produce to supply to the local market. And at the time, he was 88 years old. Today, he's 94. Several years ago, he got ill. His wife got ill. They moved here to be out of their son's way. They have a large injection molding facility in Wisconsin, and he didn't want to interfere with his son's operation. He turned it over to them. So being entrepreneurial, he had to be relevant, had to do things, and his idea was to build these 2 greenhouses and grow produce. He got the first 4,000 square foot greenhouse up, and they tried to grow some things in it, and they never did get the larger one made. And in the process, he did get ill, and I flew both he and his wife back to Wisconsin with the family, and they're in a assisted living facility there now. So they've asked me to please, tamper everything down. Their dad isn't going to be selling produce, and we have the existing structure that has no lighting, by the way. It has no lighting in it, so the lighting is not an issue. And we're just going to use it for storage, for a workshop, for whatever, indoor garden, whatever the case may be. But they haven't quite decided. They may rent the property out, they may sell it. But we want to restore it back and get rid of all the commercial aspects that we were pursuing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paris. Anyone have any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment?
We have no request for this item.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board. Any disclosures before we continue? Okay, discussion. Mr. Stanley.
Sounds like given the implication or what I thought we heard perhaps from Mr. Pelham, kind of between the lines, that this is the best and highest use that he's heard recently on this property. So from that standpoint, it sounds like remediation of some other issues is a good thing. I would also like to mention that it would be nice when you turn 90 to have a friend show up and present and help you out a little bit. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Anyone else?
No.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Lawrence.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustment approve amendment of conditions case number WAC 17-0002 for administrative permit case number AP 12-003 with amended conditions of approval as included in Exhibit A, having made all 4 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.808.25, those being for consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. We have a motion. Anyone make a second? Mr. Thank you, Mr. Stanley and Mr. Thomas. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to administrative permit case number WADMIN 17-0001, instant smog. Mr. Pelham.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Roger Pelham with Planning and Development. This is a request for an automotive repair use type in the general commercial zone. This is about the least intense sort of automotive repair type that you might come across, because no real repair takes place. This is simply a diagnostic, and I'm sure you've all done it, where you have to have your smog checked before you can register your car each year. The building itself is proposed to be only 405 square feet. Most of the work would take place in a couple of the adjacent parking spaces. This is located in the North Valley's planning area, just north of the intersection of Buck and Lemon, as shown here on the vicinity map. The site plan shows the existing building in relationship to Lemon Drive there to the left. This is an overhead photograph, again showing that site and the approximate location of the proposed building, again showing GC, that is general commercial zoning. The automotive repair use type is permissible within the GC zone, subject to the approval of an administrative permit by Washoe County. Therefore, the applicant is seeking your approval today. I received no concerns, no objections from any of the surrounding property owners. Again, this is a relatively low intensity of use. If anything, we did have a couple, at least one of the adjacent property owners who really didn't care to have a lot of buffering between the commercial use and their residential property. They think that maybe later on that might become commercial as well. But we've got a condition in there that the fence be made of durable materials, rather than in other cases where we have a commercial use adjacent to residential, we would probably specify block. But again, for the reason that they didn't really want that, we wrote the condition differently. Public notice was provided as required by the development code. 24 parcels were selected at 500 feet, as shown there. Again, they're pretty minimal conditions. This is a commercial use within a commercial zone. The proposed structure will match the other proposed structures on the project site. The colors will be muted. The architectures will be compatible. I believe that each of the required findings can be made. The use is consistent with the zone, certainly with the North Valleys area plan. This will not create sufficient improvements are in place. Again, it is directly adjacent to Lemon Drive. The site is suitable and certainly zoned correctly. There will be no significant detriment. This is really surrounded by other commercial uses. And there's no military installation in the area. I did not receive any recommendations of denial from any of the reviewing agencies. Those which provided conditions have been included in attachment A to the staff report that you have been provided. And I am recommending approval, and with that, there's a possible motion provided for your consideration. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Anyone have any questions, Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, we did receive a letter, it's in Exhibit C, that talks about that the wall not be built. Do you know what they're
Correct.
referencing on that?
Yes. And I referred to that briefly, but to the, just a moment. There we go. So the subject site is here in the center of the overhead photograph, directly to the right of that, which would be east. There are single-family dwellings, and one of those property owners did say that they didn't particularly want for there to be a hard buffer zone in between the commercial use and their residential use, because in the future they think that they may be able to change the zoning and have that be a commercial use as well. The basic code requirement is that there be a solid fence between commercial and residential uses and include a buffer with a certain number of trees and landscaping. Generally speaking, we would specify that be like a block wall, because that's a permanent type of construction versus something like a wooden fence, which is basically temporary in our environment. So what we did in this case, instead of specifying block, which would have, again, been more typical, we simply said durable materials. And I think we came to a meeting of the minds on chain link with slats, because it's permanent, it'll stay up a long time, but it's something that could be removed easily enough if at some point in the future that area to the east does in fact get their zone changed to commercial. So we tried to accommodate that comment, if that's responsive.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Anyone else? Okay, is the applicant here and wish to speak?
Good afternoon. For the record, Angela Foos with CFA representing the applicant. Just to follow up on your question, that property owner to the east also reached out to us, and we had a conversation with him. His concern is he owns that house now and it's used as a rental property, but down the road he does want to do something with it. So his preference is that there is no wall, whether it's a fence or a wall, built there. For one, it obstructs the view, and for two, it kind of blocks just that connectivity to the commercial property, so that again, down the road, if he does do something with his property that's more in line with commercial development, it would be to tie in with that existing commercial center. Because this property is zoned general commercial and the adjacent property is zoned for residential, that's the purpose of putting up that wall, is to provide that screening and that buffer. So in addition to a wall or a fence, the landscape code does require a 10-foot landscape strip with trees. So there is kind of a natural buffer that has to be put in place in addition to that wall. But again, in working with that developer or the property owner to the east, his preference is no fence or no wall, and just to keep the landscape strip as the buffer. So it's up to you guys. We as the applicant, would be willing to not put in the fence, or put in the fence depending on what your preference is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Stanley.
Yeah, I think this question is for Mr. Pelham, I believe. Roger, what happens if resident sells and new resident says, gee, what happened to my right to a wall?
It is, actually, I'm going to step back just a little bit from the question. It's a quirk of our code that you can modify standards with a variance, you can modify standards with a special use permit, but that same provision doesn't exist for an administrative permit. So we're pretty much stuck with the wall or fence. And so I tried to put in something that was then more easily modified down the line.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Stanley?
Mr. Edwards.
Chair, I was just going to say that a property owner in that situation would be deemed to have been on notice of that and taken the property in that condition. So they would essentially step into the shoes of the person they were buying it from. So it probably would not pose any significant issues for the county in that context.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment on this one?
Yes, we do. Kathy Brandhorst.
Yes, my name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I'm also the United States President. The RTC buses had mechanics, I couldn't think, work on the buses, and all the oil has been leaking from those buses. And it's all over the streets, all over the property. And we did find out that this man has never been hired as a mechanic to repair the buses. Oh my! And so that's why all the oil is leaking from all the buses right now. And playing somebody else, the real person who was the mechanic, I just heard a few minutes ago from a gentleman that the person is dead. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, the poles and wires will be going back up again on this business if this is not the correct person to open for the auto repair service. And I just wanted to tell you, you know, we've got enough wires and poles in this city already to tell us, you know, that something is going on here. And also, I kind of heard that the business was bombed, and that's why the existence is not no longer there at all. And that's really sad too, because now they have to rebuild and build another building to open the business. Oh my God. And I thought it was still in existence until I saw that picture up there with no building at all on the property. But I just wanted to tell you, be sure that this person is a mechanic for auto repairs, also truck repairs, pickup repairs, and etc. Because if you don't, we're going to have the same problem all over the city. Oil spills all over the city, and I mean really heavy oil is going to be leaking all over the streets and sidewalks and etc. wherever we can find out this person is really not in business at all. And with the poles and wires going to be set up on the property, that tells us right now that the person does not have a business at all. And I just wanted to tell you too that if he does have a permit, I hope it's not true, because if this person does not know nothing about repairing, we are going to be in lots of trouble. And I guess that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else, Madam Secretary?
We have no more requests for this item.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the board. Any disclosures? Discussion? I think this one is pretty straightforward and pretty cut and dried. Good job, Mr. Pelham. Thank you. That being the case, the chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Mr. Thomas.
I move that given reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustment approve administrative permit case number WADMIN 17-0001 for FDM LLC Frank Lepori, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Development Code Section 110.808.25, that being consistency, improvements, site suitability, and issuance not detrimental.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second by Mr. Stanley. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Bringing us to special use permit case number WSUP 17-0001, Verdi Reclaimed Lumber and Custom Manufacturing. And before we get into this, I need to make a disclosure right here. I am friends with Mr. Pierchak, the property owner. Do talk to him, however infrequently or frequently it may be. I have no financial interest in the property or partnership or anything with Mr. Pierchak, and feel that our friendship will not impact my decision in this case.
Do you have any type of business relationship as well, or is it only a social friendship?
It's just a social friendship.
Okay, and you mentioned you speak sometimes. Is it roughly how often are you guys in contact?
Oh, maybe a couple of times a month.
Yeah, okay. And you mentioned already you have no pecuniary interest in this project, the outcome of this project?
None whatsoever.
Have you made any commitments to your, to the applicant in this one way or the other?
I have not spoken with Mr. Pierchak regarding this permit, didn't know it was coming up until I saw it in the package. The only thing I can say, I was aware that he was in search of a tenant for the building, but that's
Okay.
it.
Do you feel like there's, I mean, it's a friend of yours, so let's talk about the pressure that may exist in terms of ruling one way or another on the matter. There would be some pressure there. Do you feel like that's the type of pressure that might impact your ability to handle this type of case?
No, I don't feel there would be any pressure one way or the other in my decision-making ability on this case.
Okay.
That being said, I'm of the opinion that we must maintain the highest ethical standard on the board, and in order to prevent any appearance of any impropriety, I am going to recuse myself from this case.
I think that's a sound decision, and I think it's supportable under the statutes for purposes of the appearance and the pressure that would exist in a situation like that. So with that being said, if you're recusing, then the vice chair would take over the matter, and then if you could wait outside in the foyer area there until the hearing is done, and then we'll come back out and get you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mr.
I hand
Chair.
the gavel over to Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. Mr. Pelham.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, remaining members of the board. Again, Roger Pelham for Planning and Development. Special use permit case number WSUP 170001 is for Verdi Reclaimed Lumber Custom Manufacturing. And the custom manufacturing is the use type, and I'll refer to the photo here. It would take place within that portion of the existing commercial building. It's a very old commercial building. It goes back 100 and some years, as I understand. Custom manufacturing is an industrial use type, but is permissible in the general commercial zone, subject to approval of the special use permit by this Board of Adjustment. This is located in the Verdi area, as shown here on the vicinity map. And this is right in a sort of a peninsula lot with Bridge on the west, Second on the north, and Front Street on the south. And this would be accessed from Front Street. This is a site plan, and it shows the existing building taking up nearly the entire west end of the lot there, obviously not meeting our current setback requirements, but again, this is a very old non-conforming building. On the right of the site plan here, you can see that there is some landscaping, and there is parking has also been constructed there. And it was a number of years ago when a similar commercial use was proposed that the property owner brought the entire property up to current code standards. There's one chunk that I think that the landscaping maybe has sort of been run over a little bit or died at least, and that will be brought up, re-brought up, I should say, to current code standards before a business license is issued. This is an overhead photo which shows again the nice paved striped parking area, substantial landscaping there on the east end of the parcel, and the existing commercial building on the west end of the parcel. That's the little area. The subject facility would be right behind those three large closed windows, but between the parking area and that brick building, that's the east side of the building, there is an area where the landscaping has gone away, and again, that will be repaired. There are a number of sort of materials and equipment that are currently stored in the parking area. Those will be removed, and the parking will be available for commercial customers coming to the facility. The proposed use is custom manufacturing. What they do is they take reclaimed lumber and they make custom furniture, primarily, I understand, tables. And again, we're not going to have any of the materials or equipment stored in the parking lot. Every once in a while, I guess there's going to be a trailer, just a flatbed trailer that will have brought materials in, but those are going to be for a very short duration intermittently. And so that has been written into the conditions of approval to recognize that one minor modification. And I did it again. Thank you, Donna. She's getting quicker. She knows what I did wrong this time. With that, I do believe that the findings for approval can be made. The use is consistent for the zone, again, subject to the approval of the request this afternoon. Improvements are in place. Again, there's roadways and parking and landscaping. They're all existing. The site is certainly suitable. This is a commercial building and has been for a very long time. I do not believe the issuance will be detrimental. All of the custom manufacturing will take place inside of the building, and again, very little impact external to the building itself. There is no military installation in the area, therefore there is no negative effect. I am recommending approval with the conditions. Those are included at attachment A to your staff report. Here is a possible motion, and I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Any questions? Mr. Stanley?
I just wanted to ask one, by the way, Roger, very, very well done presentations today, excellent.
Thank you.
There was a concern from one of the people attending the meeting today, a lady regarding the hours of operation, and can you reiterate what those hours are?
I would like to leave that to the applicant, but it generally, standard business, 8 to 5, Monday to Friday kind of
Okay,
thing.
I didn't know if I missed
But
it
the
before.
applicant is right there, and he can certainly address that with a little more certainty.
Thank you.
Mr. Stanley?
Two quick questions, Roger, and by the way, I concur with the nice presentation.
Thank you.
There was some mention, I think, of not only hours, but noise, sound remediation, and I think there was also something in the package that addressed the idea of toxic or hazardous process, and that was said to be less using organic materials and so forth. Can you comment on both of those things, either than both?
I can comment on the noise being inside. This is a thick brick building. I can't imagine the noise is going to be much. These are sort of woodworking equipment that are, this isn't a stamp mill or something of that nature that's putting out huge amounts. But on the specifics, types of chemicals, that sort of thing, I would really prefer to leave that to the applicant.
All right, thank you.
I have one other question for Roger. Roger, is there an air conditioning system plan for this building? Is it in the application, or?
It wasn't mentioned particularly, but the applicant can address that.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Pelham.
Thank you.
Does the applicant or his representative wish to come forward and speak? Please just state your name and your address.
My name is Alex Gonzalez.
Go ahead.
Is there any particular questions you'd like me to answer here at the moment, or?
Yes, Mr. Gonzalez, I have a couple.
Yes.
What are your hours of operation that the facility will be operating? There was some concern from someone earlier regarding.
No, understandable. We're foreseeing just a normal business day, like Roger had mentioned, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Not planning on doing any weekends at this point, so.
Sure, and I have a question regarding, is this building going to be air conditioned or a swamp cooler, or how are you going to handle that summertime heat working in there with noisy planers and joiners and things like that?
I haven't really gotten into the dynamic of the heat in that building in the summertime. I currently live up in Tahoe, but Yeah, from my understanding, it doesn't get very hot there. Well, it might get hot outside, but the building being concrete walls and the concrete floor sounded like it stayed pretty reasonable throughout the season, so.
Well, to further my question on that, if, I understand it's a brick building, and that is a pretty soundproof type structure, but if doors are left open, windows are left open for dust reasons and air movement and things,
Right.
and I know as well as you do that, these types of equipment used in the manufacturing of wood can be really super noisy. I just just curious as to why there's no air conditioning or some sort of, something like that in the application to ensure your comfort while keeping noise levels down rather than opening garage doors and windows and things like that, which would of course allow sound to escape, which may be offensive to people nearby.
Yeah, understandable. And I think in the original application, I'd mentioned that we do run a series of air filters, some pretty quality air filtration that we're going to have HEPA in there and whatnot, several of them. So getting into it, I was planning on keeping the door shut. I really didn't want to disrupt the neighbors, and quite honestly, I'm not too concerned whether I'm in the shop sweating personally. So I'm, I don't need an air conditioner, and I'm comfortable with keeping the doors closed and, keeping my air filters running and maybe some big fans to keep things circulating, so.
And I could see where air filters would draw in air from the outside, and obviously there would be a positive, negative airflow effect as you run those to keep the dust down, which I'm sure you have to do. That was basically it. I was just concerned about sound mitigation, and I hadn't heard a lot of that from people around the area as being a concern per se in the comments that we received, more or less for hours of operation, but, okay, thank you. You've answered my questions.
Very good, thank you.
Any more questions?
I had the
Mr. Allen?
question, thank you. I had the question about hazardous material or organics, and it sounded like with your air filtration system, you're obviously addressing some of that,
Yes, sir.
at least internally. What's the scoop on that? Does that get vented out, or how does that work?
So earlier on in my career, I decided to gravitate away from atomizing finishes and doing anything with VOCs. So at this point, for my own health reasons and my family, and I use just a natural oil on a lot of my pieces. So with that, it's really not a very volatile oil at all. We buff it on by hand. It really doesn't off-gas. It's a very user-friendly substance that we put on this stuff. And like I said, I don't use lacquers and I don't spray or atomize anything. And just to kind of try and put it into a little perspective, I'm getting into this industrial kind of category, and I don't feel like I'm really operating on that level, to be honest with you. We're not like banging out, table after table. I mean, I'm kind of handcrafting and noodling on these tables. I mean, I could build a table and chair set over the course of a month and be content, you know what I mean? And as far as some of the dust and stuff, I could go weeks without using a table saw, you know what I mean? I could be chiseling for quite a while in order to get to my finished product, so I just kind of want to try and put things in a perspective from that respect. I'm not like some huge industrial manufacturer or anything coming in here to just slam out tables, so more of a hand cobble thing that I'm doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
I have a question myself, and I don't
Sure.
want to overstep my bounds, but would it be unreasonable for me to request an amendment to the conditions of operations at this point, or is that out of line?
If you listened to the prior proceedings, you probably heard that a couple of the applicants had requests for amendments of conditions. So it's certainly appropriate as the applicant or representing the applicant that you do so at this time. So if you have the staff report in front of you, I would recommend that you specify which condition and which change you would like.
Yes, sir. I would like to just visit the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection 2A with the sprinkler system. And again, trying to put my business in perspective. And I understand that things are kind of black and white, but, you know, you got a guy like me doing something here, and you got my buddy Bruce Olson around the corner doing something on a much larger scale, and I feel like, you know, there's a big delta there. And these sprinklers, it's not conceivable for this building to be sprinklered, and I just wanted to visit that now rather than later. It's obviously not going to happen. But again, back to what I'm doing and how necessary is this sprinkler system, considering the scope of work and the construction of this building. And, you know, I just really want to get that in perspective for everybody and hope that I can get that removed.
Well, as the board, you're free to make judgment calls about conditions. This is a fire condition, and it is apparently based on the fire code, just reading the condition. What you could do is include the condition, but allow the sprinkler system to be waived if the fire department signs off on that. So once the applicant gets his operation, you know, close to up and running, and they come out and take a look, and he can maybe sort of explain how, you know, the operation's gonna look. If the fire department decided that, yeah, this really is in a situation where that code section comes into play, then they could essentially waive it. Otherwise, if it's just a hard and fast rule that the fire code requires, then that's just the way it goes. But at least you could build that latitude into the condition, rather than making it black and white.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Gonzalez, anything else?
No, sir, that's it.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions there regarding for Mr. Gonzalez. You mentioned that the fire code as is presented here with the sprinkler system is not conceivable. Can you elaborate to me, because you're working with wood, you're causing fine dust to get into the air. I understand you're not working with volatile organic compounds, the VOCs, which of course are more flammable, but you do have oils and things like that, specifically linseed oil, as we know, and linseed oil rag in the corner catches on fire, happens all the time. To those that aren't familiar with that, and it's too bad because Mr. Toulouse is a ex-fireman here, and he had to recuse himself from this, but I'm curious as to why you think that your facility would not catch on fire.
Several reasons. I guess first and foremost would be the volume. You know, I'm not standing behind a saw all day, just pushing lumber through it, you know. So it's very intermittent that we're actually using some of these machines that are creating dust. The three main things that I'm running, I don't want to get into it too deep, but you know, it's a table saw, it's a planer, and a joiner are the three basics that I use in my shop, and they're not often that used for the most part, as I mentioned. So I guess the first thing is the volume of dust that I'm creating. I'm not making barrels and barrels of dust, you know what I mean? If I make a couple bags a week at tops, I mean, I make a lot of little chunks of wood, don't get me wrong, by, you know, cutting them off and chiseling and whatnot, but at the same time, I'm just not going in there to just make sawdust, you know what I mean? Like I said, I'll spend weeks doing something else that I won't even turn a saw on. I mean, I might be, you know, noodling on a little leather seat or something like that, or, you know, buffing something out or chiseling, but on the grand scheme of things, I'm not constantly just generating piles of dust, you know, so, and I feel like there's no way to, or nothing really quantifies that, so to say. It's hard to really put it in perspective, but I know there's other operations out there where I could see, you know, a sprinkler would be necessary, and I just don't feel that I'm one of them. I'm kind of, that's all.
Anything else?
You know, I have nothing else for Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Right on.
Okay. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this matter?
We have no requests for this item.
Oh, I'm sorry, we may have.
I realize I spoke at the beginning of the meeting. I didn't understand the protocol. I don't often come. And I want to start out by applauding Mr. Gonzalez's.
I'm sorry, can you state your name?
My name is Tamara Barron. I live across the street at 735 South Verdi Road.
Thank you.
I want to applaud Mr. Gonzalez's vision of a hand-built furniture shop in a historic building, commercial building as it's long been. And that sounds like it's going to work. So I want to just say that up front. It sounds like it's going to work. In the past, the experience is that those big, when you saw that picture of the side of the building, the big white building, those big old doors are big old wooden doors, and they close imperfectly. And that whole south side of the building gets very hot in summer. And in the past, previous tenants have opened those doors the minute it gets hot because there isn't an air system within the building. And then all of the noise from whatever's happening inside the building comes directly out of the building. And it's odd, but it just goes directly across the street, and the hill behind my house bounces all the noise down into my house. So I guess I'm like the primary recipient of most of the industrial noise that happens in that building. The previous tenant was somebody who did not maintain normal business hours, was often working at 8 to 10 at night, was grinding granite all the time from 8 in the morning till 7 at night often, and it was really disturbing. I mean, we do have the trains. I can't say it's a perfectly quiet neighborhood, but in between the trains, it was quiet. So I guess that's what I'm looking for, is some protection for the residents who are to the east of him and to the west of him and to the south of him, that the quality of our life can be maintained while Mr. Gonzalez is able to have his business, which I think would be wonderful for him to be able to have. I just want some assurance that he's not going to move out onto that concrete platform directly in front of those big doors, that he's not going to work on the side of the building where there's that concrete area, that he's not going to be storing materials directly opposite the building on the railroad property. I don't know if Mr. Perchak leases that from the railroad, but that's currently where most of the materials previously for his tenants had been stored. So we went from, when Mr. Perchak got the building, we went from a building that was pretty dormant and historical into a place that really was very active with large machines, a lot of noise, a lot of storage, and not compliant with a residential environment, even though we do have the trains going through. So I appreciate your listening to those concerns, and I just hope that there's a way that it can be contained within the building. The work can be contained within the building, because when it's not, it's everybody's business. Thank you.
Just 1 second. Are there any questions?
No, not for me.
Thank you.
I do want to make one clarification, if I can.
Please.
Mr. Pelham, you had mentioned that it's an inside operation, so meaning that the electrical tools that are going to be used are going to be inside the structure, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That's really all I had for you, was just a confirmation of that, for my edification.
I think one more point too is, reading through the documents, is that they're not going to be storing materials outside.
Also
That would be
correct.
inside.
If there is a concern by the board, it's certainly within our ability to craft another condition that says all of the work will take place within the structure with the door closed.
I would be amenable to that, as it sounds like that is what Mr. Gonzalez has indicated, and I would be more apt to approve his application with some assurances to that if we were to include that as a condition, quite honestly. I think that would satisfy Ms. Barron's concern, and it would simply reinforce his statements here today. So I think that should be included as a condition if we can do that.
Anything else for Mr. Pelham?
No, I certainly agree with that condition, by the way, so thank you for that, that idea. Roger, Mr. Phillum, the fire sprinkler situation, obviously, that's something that you considered. What was your thinking on that? I know we've heard from legal, but what from a planning standpoint, given the business, given the area, and propensity for fires and so forth, what are you thinking?
I will say I gave that no thought whatsoever.
Okay.
That is what was provided by the fire department, and I copied and pasted it in. They are the experts there, I am not.
Gotcha. All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
And I will make one other comment, just to follow up with that. I mean, I'm willing, in the spirit of compromise, to also agree with Mr. Gonzalez, if the rest of the board is agreeable to it, to leaving the final decision up to the fire department as to determining whether or not a sprinkler system is in fact required in such a facility as is. So that's my thoughts on that.
Donna, if you could, would you turn on the overhead camera here? I did go ahead and write up a condition real quick. It would be condition 1N, as in Nancy, if you chose to go that way. You would perhaps zoom in there, can we?
You may assist us by reading it also.
Okay, well, there it is, and I'll read it into the record. All work shall take place within the structure with the doors closed.
Anything else for Mr. Pelham? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and close the hearing there and bring this back to the board.
I have one other comment. There should be doors and windows.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Discussion? Stanley?
With one in and so forth, and the good discussion and the community input, and the obviously very, very neat use of the building, in my humble opinion. It sounds like a proposal that's been adjusted properly to fit, and with the community and so forth, and great planning. So very positive in that regard.
And the fire situation, what does the board feel on that? We need to make a decision on that to finalize whether or not we leave that option open. And I'm not sure how to word that because I screwed the last one up bad enough.
Well, let me address that. I guess with the fire issue, there's a couple things. One, we're asking the renter basically to refit the building instead of the owner, or requiring that. So the owner probably would have to be responsible for that. Two, and I'm not into fire science, so I really don't know the answer to this. I don't know if there's grandfather clauses in for ages of buildings or exceptions or something like that that would allow for the exception for it not to be applied. And three, I don't know whether this is standard boilerplate language that came from the fire department without going to the scene and actually looking it over to see whether it would be necessary or not. I am not adverse to putting in a condition that asks for the fire department to visit the site and make an independent decision on it of whether it is necessary or not. And I think that would ultimately determine whether this moves forward with the applicant, whether he's willing to do that. So that would be my take on that for the fire situation, for the sprinkler situation. As for the working inside, I understand that. I agree with the noise. I wouldn't want table saws and everything else to be outside, but evidently that's part of the condition anyway, that things won't be stored outside. But to lock the individual inside during the heat of summer or something like that, I don't know if that's really a fair way to go. I mean, you may have to open and close doors at times. You might have a door open or cracked for some ventilation, or, a early spring day when it's cold out inside, you open the door a little bit for some heat to get in. I'm not saying it's an either or, but I think as a good neighbor, you would need to take in, Mr. Gonzalez would need to take into account and consideration the noise levels, and when he's gonna be turning on equipment, things like that, maybe close the doors at that time, you know, and if he's not and he's chiseling away on something and it's kinda quiet in there, then open the door and enjoy the sunlight. So, that's just my take on it. Mr. Stanley?
In given kind of my background with serving on the cab and so forth, I probably put more emphasis than some on community impact and so forth. But if being warm or that sort of thing were a problem, then air conditioning might seem an easier solution than a noisy window or a noisy door. But we hear, I think, from the applicant that the temperature is not a problem, nor has it been. He doesn't mind sweating over his custom wood anyway. Maybe it adds a little touch. So I don't know why we should, I have a little problem jeopardizing noise impact when in fact there's a pretty easy, theoretically, a pretty easy solution called air conditioning.
I have a comment to that. Well, again, he is renting the building, leasing the building. Well, we could say all power tool work shall take place within the structure with the doors and windows closed. We're spending a lot of time on this. I see that, more than usual.
Well, I think we're just trying to find a solution that
Good
works for
solution.
everybody. And I think both sides, everyone has to, all considerations have to be taken in place. The quietness of the neighborhood, I think, is important, but you also have a business that has to operate too.
Well, and I agree with the fact it is an industrial building. That is true. That is the other aspect of this true, this as well.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, one additional item. I think this is kind of a belts and suspenders, one in, is that what it is? Assurance. And by that I mean, if no noise is emanating and someone goes out for a breath of fresh air, I don't know that that's a breach of that particular condition. If some, you know, I imagine it's a matter of degree, but I agree with you that if something's making a lot of racket, then that's the only thing that's gonna get anybody's attention, that there's been a breach of that particular condition. So that would be my thinking on that.
Any further discussion? Okay. I will entertain a motion.
I had one comment on the discussion about the fire issue. If there is an appetite to change that condition, I can help you word that. So whoever is gonna make the motion, I'm happy to help add one clause to that, which I think will address what you've been talking about.
So let me just clarify this with the board here as well. I'm sorry. The 1N is not something that we're gonna include in this motion?
From my standpoint, I would include it. That's, I was arguing for it. Although,
Okay,
I mean,
and I would too. I would include 1N in this
As
with the
well-
power,
as
just
well-
with power tools, that's all.
Yeah, I would be more amenable to the doors and windows be closed while using the power tools. but
Correct.
Not necessarily all the time.
No, I totally agree. I think that's unreasonable.
Should we get some kind of a nod or a concurrence from the applicant that
Are you in agreement? Are you, if you'd approach the microphone, I'm
Gonzalez,
sorry.
would you come back up? You've kind of heard what we've discussed. What we were asking is if you would be willing that when you operate power tools that will be inside your building to begin with, that you would take the peace and quiet of the neighborhood into consideration and close doors and windows at the time while you're operating those.
You know, I can honestly say so. You know, I've spent a little time down there at the building, and I've kind of got a sense that, you know, there's a community there, and, you know, I live in a community myself, and I'm not going down there to try and disrupt anybody or anything like that. So I think even if you reflect back to my original application on some of the, I don't have it in my hand, but on my original application, I had put, you know, in order to help keep the noise down, you know, my thought out the gate was really just to keep the door shut. And, you know, I know when we're making noise, and I know what machines make noise, and I have no problem respecting the neighborhood and the people that live around there. You know, I think I can work well within that, honestly, so.
All right, thank you, sir.
Very
I
good,
just
thank
have
you.
one other, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you
Very
very much,
You're
actually.
welcome.
Lawrence.
I just would, with his assurances, I would be, here again, I'll use the word amenable to him and the fire department working out the fire issues. If you would help us, Mr. Edwards, with that,
Sure.
when the time comes.
Yeah, and in fact, if you want to do that right now, I can. And if somebody's got a pen, one of the three of you has a pen, you can write down on condition.
Well, Roger,
Condition 2A, page 3 of 4 in Exhibit A. The second to last sentence of that condition says, "This building is 3,500 square feet. Therefore, a fire sprinkler system shall be installed for the business, comma, unless an adequate alternative fire suppression arrangement is approved by the fire protection district."
Can you say that again, please? Hank? Unless,
Yes. Unless an adequate alternative fire suppression system is approved by the fire protection district.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Stanley.
a question. Would that then be a condition with an identifier as in, for an example, was?
it's 2A.
Yes.
2A?
It's gonna be 2A.
Okay, just amended language.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just being added to 2A.
Thanks.
Condition 1. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion.
You wanna give it a shot, or you want me to?
Certainly, with heavy assistance.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I move that after given reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approves special use permit case number WSUP 17-0001 for Alex James Gonzalez with the conditions of approval included at Exhibit A to this report, also including Condition 1N and modification in Condition 2A, which reads as follows.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Condition 2A will be modified to read, "This business shall meet the requirements of Washoe County Code 60 and the International Fire Code. The International Fire Code requires that an automatic fire sprinkler system be installed in all occupancies that contain woodworking operations that exceed 2,500 square feet. This building is 3,500 square feet. Therefore, a fire sprinkler system shall be installed for the business unless an adequate fire suppression system is approved by the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Plans shall be submitted for the fire sprinkler system for review and approval prior to occupancy." New Condition 1N will read, "All work with power tools shall take place within the structure with the doors and windows closed."
Thank you. And having made all 5 findings, including these adjustments and additions to the conditions, in accordance with Washoe County Development Code Section 110.810.30, 1, consistency, 2, improvements, 3, site suitability, 4, issuance not detrimental, and 5, effect on a military installation.
Do we have a second?
Second?
We do have a quorum, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Webb, I don't know if you need to address the appeal process at all on this one, or not? I don't know if you need to address the appeal process on this. We had the lady that, we did have a lady that had concerns.
So to the vice chair's question, now that I'm on the microphone, I read the appeal process at the beginning, and the appeal process stands.
Fine then, thank you. And with that, we'd like to welcome back the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I think that takes us right to special use permit case number WSUP 17-0003, a UDS barn limited liability commercial stables, and looks like we have the pleasure of Mr. Pelham again.
Thank you, sir. Again, Roger Pelham with Planning and Development. This special use permit, SUP 17-0003, is for UDS barn. This is for commercial stables. Primarily, this is going to be for the boarding and training of up to 25 horses, and including the construction of a riding arena of approximately 20,000 square feet. That is to say, an indoor riding arena. I apologize. Donna, could you turn it back on again? I apologize. My fingers are too fat for this little remote control here. This is, shown overhead, is a site plan of the southern 20 of the 30 acres which are proposed to be utilized for this commercial use type. This one is a little bit unusual in that a commercial stables has been previously approved and in fact is in operation on the subject site at this time. However, their previous approval expired. They were unaware of that about a year and a half or 2 years ago, something like that. And now it requires a new special use permit, and we're looking at this essentially from scratch. Now, on the site plan to the right, you see there is a barn, a number of stables in there, building for hay and feed storage. And there's also a single-family dwelling on the parcel. The caretaker lives there. And on the left, sort of the upper left portion of the site plan, you see indoor arena. That is where the new building is proposed to be constructed. This is basically a large metal building, and so folks can ride horses when the weather's otherwise uncooperative. This is the overall project site. It was the cover letter to the application talks about how the facility really started just on the one 10-acre parcel. The riding arena is now proposed on the 10-acre parcel to the west, and the 10-acre parcel to the north is additional pasture and grazing, again, for this commercial use. Here's a couple of photos of the subject facility. It's, to be completely subjective, it's a pretty nice looking facility. There's all of the fencing is sort of the white 3-rail fencing. The buildings all match in color and style and choice of building materials. This is the parking area. You'll notice that the surfacing is not asphalt or concrete, but rather gravel. A modification to the approval, a modification of standards is requested with the approval to allow the use of gravel rather than asphalt or concrete, which would otherwise be required for a commercial use of this type. So, going into the background, back in 2002, the administrative permit was approved for the commercial stables. That approval was allowed for 7 years. About 3 years later, they came in for an amendment of conditions. And at that time, the approval was extended for 10 additional years. That took us to about 2015. And again, it is still in operation at this time, and that approval has been gone since July of 15. So again, our current request is to reestablish a legal use type there, commercial stables, to expand the use from the original 10 acres to a total of 30 acres, to increase the number of horses from 15 previously to 25 now, and again, to include the riding arena of 20,000 square feet. The South Valley's area plan recognizes that these types of equestrian uses are part of sort of the culture in that area. This is a little excerpt. The existence of livestock, particularly horses and cattle, for recreational, economic, and educational purposes is commonplace and recognized as a significant contributor to the local character. So all that to say, this is generally compatible with the surrounding area. Because this is in operation at this time, I believe it is unlikely that the expansion will create substantial detriment to the surrounding area. Generally speaking, the conditions of approval are limited to requiring the applicant to come into compliance with current code provisions. And there's substantial detail in pages 9 through 16 in your staff report. Now, the amendment or the modification came very late in the process, and so what we had to do was send that out again just to those couple of 3 agencies that I felt may have some input. The modifications were reduction in landscaping and reduction in the parking standards. Animal control actually came back and said that, yeah, you know what, it's probably better to have gravel surface rather than asphalt for horses, so certainly comfortable in recommending approval of that part of the modification. The other is to reduce the landscaping where this commercial use abuts residential. Not unlike a case earlier this afternoon, there is a requirement for a solid fence, trees every so many feet, and a certain buffer, a certain landscape buffer, again, in between the commercial and the residential uses. I was not comfortable in recommending approval of that carte blanche without those adjacent residential properties being noticed. So basically what I did was I wrote a condition that said, well, I understand that this is sort of a rural atmosphere. This is a common use type in the area, but as we're going to go ahead and keep that buffer in there unless they go ahead and bring us a letter from the adjacent property owner saying, yeah, that they agree to that reduction in standards. It's a little unorthodox, but given the really, really short time frame I had to work with, that was about the best I could come up with. And those are the 2 conditions here. And those have been included in Exhibit A with the remainder of the recommended conditions of approval. Public notice was provided to the surrounding area in accordance with development code requirements. In this case, we had 39 additional parcels, or well, the subject site plus 39. I am recommending approval. I believe that the conditions recommended, which would ensure compliance with generally applicable code provisions, are sufficient to mitigate any substantial negative impact on the surrounding area. I believe that the findings can be made. Certainly it is consistent with the South Valley's area plan, as I noted previously. The improvements are there. Again, this has been in operation for 15 years, and what we're doing now is getting that legalized and coming into conformance with current code standards. The site is certainly suitable. It has been utilized for 15 years. Animal Control noted that when they did their inspection, that even after the extraordinarily wet winter we've had, there was standing water in areas, that there were still plenty of areas that were nice and dry that the animals could get up out of the mud. I do not believe that the issuance would be significantly detrimental. Again, this is a common use type in this area, and generally speaking, code standards will mitigate whatever impact might be created. There is no military installation in the area, therefore there is no negative effect. So, I am recommending approval with conditions. We have a possible motion here, and I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Pelham? Mr. Stanley?
Roger, the CAB meeting that this was presented at, I believe, do I recall that there was a question about after hours and observation of animals after hours? In other words, there was a concern about animals, the horses and so forth, particularly given the wellness aspect, that about keeping an eye on those animals after 5 o'clock. I also noticed here there was something about a groundskeeper or something. So can you marry those two concepts a bit, please?
Absolutely. I believe that the comments that you recall were for the other commercial stables that were heard at that same CAB meeting. There were two requests that same day in the same area plan. In this case, however, we do have a caretaker on site all the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Lawrence?
I just have one. I was reading in here, Roger, regarding, there we go, the water rights, just for my edification on this, not that it's part of this is per se pertinent today in this, but it said a Washoe County business license was obtained by the applicant in 2002 for the commercial stable. However, water rights were not obtained pursuant to Washoe County Code Section 110. And are they talking about the water rights dedication requirement in that
That is
respect?
correct, yes.
And can you just tell me what that is? What we're talking about here?
When you do a commercial use, you use more water than a house. Each of these parcels has a domestic privilege for a well that would support a house, but doing a commercial use needs more. So you have to purchase water rights somewhere and transfer them to that well so that we can pump enough water out of here to, keep the pasture green and keep the horses watered.
Okay.
And how that slipped by the first time, I do not know. But we're going to make sure it happens this time prior to a business license.
Okay, so they have to purchase these, they don't have these water rights now, they have to purchase them still?
I do not know whether they've purchased them yet or not. If it were me, I would wait till after I had an approval before I went and spent the money for the additional water rights. I know that we do have the applicant here.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Does the applicant wish to speak? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment?
We have no request for public comment.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the board. Disclosures? No disclosures? Okay, we're open for discussion. Anyone? Mr. Stanley or Mr. Thomas?
I like the idea that there's that certainly, and I think the folks who are neighbors like the idea that there's someone to keep an eye on the animals after hours. And that was something I think that was mentioned by both, but I think you're right, it was mentioned more about the other. And it sounds like the water rights issue is contingent upon, so it sounds good. And I couldn't agree more that it's an absolutely beautiful facility, certainly in the photographs.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Oh, I was going to say, they've been in operation before. It's not like they're coming new to us. They've run evidently a very good operation. I have no problem with the amendments as to the non-asphalt, to go ahead and keep it as to the gravel with that. I do agree with Mr. Pelham's recommendation that at the very least we should probably get letters from the neighbors as to their input for the barrier up there by their property.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
I really don't have that much. It's, I'm familiar with that area of town and grew up here, and, there's places like that around, and they seem to operate just fine all the time.
Great. Thank you. I don't really have anything to add. Echoing my colleagues' comments about the screening issue and the letters, I'm fine with that. Other than that, it looks like a fine project. I know it's been in business before and for a long time, so I don't have any issues. Chair will entertain a motion. Mr. Stanley.
I move that after given reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve special use permit case number WSUP 17-0003 for UDS Barn LLC with a condition of approval included as Exhibit A for this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Development Code Section 110.810.30, to wit, 1, consistency, 2, improvements, 3, site suitability, 4, issuance not detrimental, 5, effect on military installation.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. We have a motion, a second. Seconded by Mr. Thomas. All in favor? Aye.
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 No opposition. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Item 10 on the agenda, future agenda items. Anybody got anything for future agenda items? Request for information from staff. I just want to say the staff continues to do an awesome job as far as I'm concerned. We would be really lost without all of the help from staff. Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Please relay that to the rest of the staff. We're really happy with your performance, and you as well, Mr. Webb. Moving on, 11A, Directors and Legal Counsel's items. Report on previous Board of Adjustment items. Mr. Webb?
Have nothing.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Mr. Edwards? Anything legal?
No, nothing else for now.
Okay. Madam Secretary, I don't see anybody, but do we have any public comment?
We did, but they left, so
Okay,
no.
great. Thank you. That being said, we stand adjourned.